very differently?
I'm Anant from San Francisco, and I also lead research and strategy across a few accounts. My favorite one, I think, because we tend to geek out a lot on consumer insights, what ends up happening is anything we can do in order to inform technologies that we align with often, that sort of works very well in our favor, and we try to go and endorse those a lot harder as well. So one of them was, I think, recently where we could actually learn about millennial behavior, millennials as customers, and how do you target them from a financial industry standpoint. And we were able to take, working with your teams at me on this one too, right? But it's like, where do you go after them? It's like, they might be in the market for something on the lines of, hey, we're about to have kids, so we should be there at those baby stores. So where can we target them after going and go after them? You go out party a lot, so can we go target bars and restaurants that they tend to hang out more? So campaigns that align with customer insights and things that we actually fall back on, I think those are some of my favorite ones.
Hello, my name is Jesse Wolfersberger. I work for a company called GroupM Next. GroupM Next is the innovation unit of GroupM, so we are in charge of providing all kinds of tip-of-the-spear type innovation things for all of the GroupM agencies. I will give you an incredibly self-serving example. A couple weeks ago at CES, I don't know, show of hands who's at CES a couple weeks ago? Yeah. If you could make it out there, I barely made it, Polar Vortex. Anyway, we partnered with Foursquare and did what was called Check-in CES. So our chairman, Erwin Gottlieb, gives kind of a famous CES tour every year, and we kind of decided to bring that to people who weren't on the guest list. So if you had Foursquare, you could check in at the different booths that he highlighted on his tour, and it would pull up a little video or some more text or some more info. So you could kind of take the Erwin tour even if you weren't with Erwin. So that's kind of.
Hi, I'm Eric Perko from Digitas in San Francisco, where I manage the Taco Bell business. I think that my favorite thing that we've done based on location and hyperlocal in the last 15 months is integrations with Waze, the popular navigation app. And I think the reason why I like that so much is that it really adds value to the utility that the user is leveraging in that case, and really gets to the core of some of these issues that we're going to talk about, that the location is woven into the actual app, so us integrating into that app provides value to the user.
So let's talk about location. So how do you overcome the location conversation with your brands that do not have a brick and mortar address? And so I'll start. I think it's really approaching the challenge creatively. So we see this pretty often, actually, and I think you have to think about maybe consumer insights, for example. So what are the daily patterns that a consumer might be demonstrating? How could we intercept them at a meaningful moment to deliver our message? And that's one way using location data to message to a consumer who might not be driving to a brick and mortar location.
If I think back, I think one of the partnerships that we did recently with Yelp, I think that was very fruitful in targeting non-brick and mortar locations. I think one is by providing the value that you think your brand can perform. So in this case, it's like Wells Fargo as a name. They're trying to provide value to the customers. So if people are looking for a location to go look at bars or restaurants, can we actually show them where the closest ATM is in case this particular bar or restaurant is cash only? So what ends up happening in this case is while the brand is not somewhere, or the KPI might not be to drive store visits, I think what ends up happening is you're still developing better brand preference and awareness.
Yeah, I think from the clients that we have that don't have brick and mortar locations, they're really excited about kind of what's coming up. The sort of iBeacon, sort of near field stuff, the hyper location targeting, they're really pumped about it. Because for the longest time, they've kind of been on the sidelines. They've been doing interesting mobile things, don't get me wrong, but now they can move it in store and to the shelf, and oh, you're standing right there. So I think right now is a really interesting time for a lot of them, and I can't wait to see what we're going to do with it.
Yeah. So Taco Bell obviously does have physical locations, and that's our competition. So it's something that we very much believe in the value of that. But I think even in the case where brands they don't have physical locations, there's a lot you can learn going on you can learn a lot about someone's current state of mind or what they're doing from where they are. So whether or not they're at a concert or doing something else, I think it allows you to tailor your message really specifically to what they're doing.
As the industry moves forward, we're all talking about location. Everyone says they have access to location. It's somewhat ubiquitous at this point. So how closely are you looking at the accuracy of those data signals or vetting out the location inventory that your partners are speaking about?
So we look at it very closely. I get pitched a location offering probably multiple times a day. And it gets exhausting. So how do we start to determine who has the best data and how they're using that data? So we ask them specific questions around where their data source, or what their data sources are, how they analyze it, what their algorithm looks like. And that's a way for us to filter who has the best sources for certain clients over others.
In our case, I think what ends up happening is you always go back to the campaign objective and try and see what are we really trying to get. I mean, for example, if a partner comes and pitches about how accurate they can get while we're actually in a place like Houston, the distance of travel is so much, it's not something that's going to help us. And in some cases, I think more recently what's happened is you can map a lot of the location data back to where people live, their behavior, tons of demo information that can be mapped back to that location as well. And it always comes back to what we're trying to achieve. In some cases, it might be just like, hey, are we trying to get somebody to go get a free credit score at the store? Or in some cases, it might be just like, hey, are we trying to get them to come in with a checking account? I don't know, but I think it depends on the campaign objective, and I think that's sort of where partners get measured a lot.
So I'll kind of take the similar point, or kind of maybe the in-between point of both of you guys, which is we obviously care about the accuracy. We do everything we can to check, but at the end of the day, I almost don't care as long as it works. So the onus is on the vendor, not us. If your location data is accurate, and then it's gonna work, and it's gonna do everything you say it's gonna do, and it's gonna come out in our models and look great, and we're gonna give you more money. And if not, we're not going to. So you can say whatever you want to say. It's this % accurate, or the R squared is this on our model, but we'll find out. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. So you can only hide for so long.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's very important, and it comes down to asking the right questions when you're vetting the technology and understanding like how it works and where the data's coming from. But another way that we've successfully gotten around it is integrating into applications that are actually hinging on the location. So Wave being an example, or Yelp, where it's not really a question of the accuracy of the data; it's how the app actually functions. So that's a way to get really specific, very specific.
I'm going to jump around a little bit with our questions based on your responses, but how do you trust mobile location partners? I think you talked about the vetting process. What does that look like, especially with kind of new mobile partners to kind of the opportunity?
I think one tip would be asking to speak with some of the partners that they claim to be working with, especially when it's a startup. So we found ourselves in a situation where they say that, oh, we've got partnerships in place here, here, and here, but in actuality, those deals weren't signed. And so sometimes especially with new companies, it's worth just having that third conversation with those companies to understand those relationships. But aside from that, I think it's asking about case studies, asking about other client work that they've done so that you have some examples to put forward when you're talking with your clients.
Yeah, I agree with what Sarah's saying. It comes down, a lot of it is on us to make the right decisions and recommend the right solutions to our clients. But the trust factor, I think, is just something that is gained through tenure and through performance. There's not really a silver bullet in how you get trust. It's something that's earned over time. There's not really like a science to it.
Yeah, and I think what's also working out recently, what we've seen a lot more is beyond the rational elements of just like case studies or like what can your company do. It's about collaboration a lot, and I think a lot of agencies are welcoming that. I don't know if you agree, but it's just like come along with us and see who are the other vendors we're talking to, all the big partners that we may be talking to, and how can your technology fit in, and let's make it work together instead of just trying and seeing that we can just marry your technology with something else after you decided something for the plan.
So I'm now going to backtrack on what I said my last question. So before I said it'll kind of vet out the numbers, but if you've never worked with someone before, if it's a startup that is kind of new, you may not have the time or you don't want to do that initial investment. So there is a sort of art to it, or feel to it. And a lot of these startups, the smaller ones, will kind of say, I mean, they're looking at, you know, some of our big brands, AT&T, Dell, you know, whoever, Unilever, and yeah, whatever you want. Yes, we'll do that. And it's like, the weight of these brains will crush these startups. These startups might have, you know, 6 employees, and, you know, they'll tailor everything they do to one of these big brands, but that's not really what we want them to do. You know, we want them to kind of do their vision, do their thing, and, you know, we'll kind of work within that framework, but we don't want to crush you and make you turn you into something you're not. So in terms of kind of tangible recommendations, I always say, I want to talk to the PhD. Somewhere behind the scenes on your team, you know, I'm talking to the salesperson or the front of the company or whatever. There's a guy with a PhD sitting in a back room in front of a computer somewhere. I want to talk to him, and I want to connect him with the PhDs on my side of the economists or whatever, and have them sort of talk. Now, if you are on the sidelines, it might sound like they're talking Latin to each other or something, but that's really, I want to know, like, you know, what the back end of this stuff is. Don't give me the sales pitch. Like, let's talk, you know, some real numbers, and give me some data. Give me 5 rows of data. Give me, you know, I'm not asking for a free database of unlimited data. Give me 5 rows of everything, every variable you have in a sheet, and I'm going to send it over to my analytics team and see what they think of it.
And there is a healthy amount of risk involved too. I mean, if we're going to be innovative, we're going to do new things. Not everything is going to work perfectly, and that's certainly part of the game as well. So, you know, you have to be able to sort of go hands off a little bit and take some risks, and resign yourself to not everything's going to be successful.
Yeah, building off that, it's a mix of, you know, art and science, looking at kind of at what point does performance trump strategy? Is it a mix of both? What's weighted more heavily? The marketing story or the performance behind it? Obviously, with new partners, it's a little bit difficult to see that performance up front. So how does that work kind of specific to each of your brands?
I think you were talking about it earlier today, Eric, and I was on the call. And we like, you know, strategy always comes first. And then after that, it's a blend of everything else. Because if you don't have a direction, if you don't know where you're headed with the campaign or in terms of who you're targeting, all of those things will just fall apart. You need to have a spot where you want to get ahead and then go after that. And then keep measuring.
Yeah, I think it depends on what results you're trying to drive. I mean, if it's just like cost per download or cost per action, it could be a much different ballgame. But if we're doing our job correctly, our strategy should pay off in the way of performance, and they should be closely tied together.
Absolutely. I think strategy always comes first. I mean, I think we're all in agreement on that. But I think the question is, I'll kind of give you my answer, and maybe you guys can jump in. How long's the leash? So if you start with strategy and it's sort of, it's good strategically, numbers are coming in, they're not really working, how long is that leash? I think in my experience, it's about a year. You can kind of get by on strategy and theory for maybe a year before I go, okay, we're not seeing anything else. I was agree, disagree.
Yeah, moving on from performance, attribution, right? You know, measurement and attribution are still in their infancies within the mobile space. How are you separating out attribution for mobile, or are you looking at it as far as it goes within the entire marketing mix?
I was going to say, it's not something that directly impacts talk about, because we're mostly trying to engage with users, and there's not an action that we're optimizing towards. I mean, ultimately, we want everyone to come to the store and have product. But I think it's definitely something that needs growth and improvement, and a lot of it will be achieved through your universal tracking and ad serving that will enable a lot of that attribution tools that exist in display to grow.
I think on our end, we're looking at mobile-specific KPIs, as well as how performance for mobile contributes to the overall performance for the brand. So through MMA studies for a CPG brand, for example, and working very closely with those teams to make sure that mobile is accurately captured. And I would say 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, it's not, just because the models don't exist. So then you use some of the benchmarks that we've established for mobile that can contribute to the overall marketing mix analysis. But I think it's an ongoing challenge, and we get challenged on this issue all the time. And how does mobile contribute to the overall performance of our brand? I wish I had an answer. That was perfect.
So from my perspective, I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but hire good economists, hire really good math people. these models that they're building, sort of, if you kind of rewind maybe 5 or 10 years, the media mix models that they've been doing are kind of existed and kind of set. We're inventing entire new things right now. So to do that, you really need good, smart math people. And if you get that, like, they'll figure it out. They'll build good attribution models that you'll be happy with.
Yeah, and building off of that, we are inventing new metrics for mobile. And so if you could just go through and kind of rattle off some of the key KPIs that you're looking at specific to your brands or the verticals you're working with.
For us, it depends on the campaign and what the creative idea is and what the media strategy is, but a lot of it is what you'd expect. Tap to navigate to a store locator, any sort of engagement, whether it's like watching a video, but each of our campaigns is pretty unique from one another, so it varies campaign to campaign.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of it comes down to, I think we were talking about it earlier today as well. Is the company capable of handling that? Like click to call, I think we were talking about it earlier. If the company is not ready to handle it, then we're probably not going to direct you there. But at the same time, we understand that there are a ton of things you can use, but with big brands, often it comes down to engagement. And if you can do things like, if you're at a competitive store, and you can do some conquesting work over there and try and send them back, and see how many did we actually capture. Can we talk about it, or if the stores come back and give you some feedback?
I think most of the KPIs we look at are ones that have been mentioned. The one thing I would call out when I started speaking earlier today was that we look at tablets versus smartphones and making sure to establish the KPIs because they could be very different for the different devices. Tap to map might work on smartphones, but it's not going to work on tablets, and instead your focus on tablets is engagement rates. So we are very focused on being pretty granular based on the device or based on the even operating system at times because the consumer profile is so different for certain clients.
Yep, agreed. I'll kind of throw one more in there that I think is interesting is sort of share of time. So if you look at, if you've got this data available on all devices, tablets, mobile, laptops, things like that, is the share of time people are spending with you like just shifting, or is it growing? Like is the pie chart just kind of, oh, they used to spend time here, now that's here, or are they spending a bigger span of time with your brand altogether?
When looking at mobile, it's obviously so tech heavy, and then as an agency, from the agency perspective, you're working with your brands. At what level do your brands want to understand the back end of the technology? I know from our perspective, we work pretty closely with Scion on the brand side as well as the agency side to kind of explain what's happening behind the scenes so that, the national and the regional level, everyone's on board and can understand the how and the why of what we're doing. For each of your brands, how involved are they? Or are they looking at you to be kind of a mediator between that?
I think we work with some really large brands, and I think one of them is Wells Fargo, and we've been talking about them a little bit. They like to be very involved. And the reason is not because they want to constantly interfere with how agencies function and things along those lines. It's more on the lines of they want to be smart about it too. They want to learn, they want to make sure when they actually come back and talk to the senior executives back in the team, they know what they're talking about. What I think plays a big role in how we educate them, and based on that, what we learn from you. So often they'll be in the presentations with us. And I think it goes a long way in terms of not just explaining things and selling things back to the client, but also from our standpoint, are we at the cutting edge of whatever these technologies might be working on?
Yeah, it's the same on Taco Bell. They're surprisingly hands-on and we love to get into the weeds and understand how everything works. And honestly, our team really appreciates it because it makes our job a little bit easier. They're really taking a vested interest in understanding what we're recommending. I mean, obviously, we're the first path to recommend what's smartest, but there's a lot of benefits that come from them being really involved, so they know their internal workings better than anyone, and they can understand, like, if that's the way it works, we can maybe insert this data or make it work this way or make this optimization to the process. So we really like how into the weeds they get.
I think from all the brands I've talked to, let's just be honest, it's cool stuff. They want to know how it all works. They want to know, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's pretty cool. But I totally agree that there's kind of like one layer of filtering where one of the things we do is we talk to all the VCs and we tell them, bring us 10 of your best startups, and we all kind of get a big conference room and sit in there and we do it for like 3 days. I kind of refer to it as our Shark Tank. And they kind of come in every 15 minutes and do their pitch, we ask them questions, we move on. So from there, maybe the VC brings in, let's say 10, maybe 2 of those or one, or make it to the brand and say this is the best one. So I think there's kind of a one-layer filter, but once it gets there, they want to know, like the brands want to know everything about it, and I think that's really cool to see that curiosity.
I think one more thing is, I think what ends up happening, it benefits us a lot, is it keeps us honest. Because I think if you look at highly regulated groups like insurance companies or financial industries, they have whitelists you have to work with. You can't just go after every site. They want to appear on specific sites. They have to be very careful about what context they're being talked to. And often we just don't know those answers, and having them in the room keeps us honest and keeps us very true to what the brand wants to do.
Yeah, building right on top of that, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you have to sell through a mobile location to your brands? Because that's, that's your role to vet and also to kind of push that through. And what are the questions that your brands are asking? If it's privacy, if it's compliance, is it creative? What's really the biggest hurdle you've seen?
I think for us, it's that you can drive scaled results. Taco Bell is traditionally a very big broadcast brand. They've invested heavily in TV for a number of years. And we've seen a lot of success in digital and in mobile, but it's really getting alignment and belief that if you invest heavily in these spaces, that it can drive sales in the same way that TV can. And TV is still really, really powerful, so we're not trying to advocate against that, but it's understanding that you can drive influence or significant numbers.
I would say on the whole, having the location conversation with the client, whether they're a brick and mortar or not, is fairly easy in that clients get really excited about access to this new data. I think that they lean on us to understand some of the privacy, compliance issues and challenges, but then look to figure out how they can creatively use that data and how that brand can find a niche with using that data and driving a really interesting consumer engagement. Which gets us excited. It challenges us as an agency to think differently on each piece of business. So I don't want to say anything's easy in my job, but I do think that they get really excited about using the data.
So here's kind of a specific, I agree with all these things. I think one of the big challenges of my day-to-day job is a lot of these startups and a lot of these smaller companies, they have no idea how to talk to brands. And they come in and they have terrible PowerPoints and things like that. It's those types of things can be challenges too, because I completely agree that the appetite is there. All of the brands are saying, we've been hearing about mobile for 5 years now. It's the year of mobile. It's been the year of mobile for 5 years. They're ready to go. Here's the money, give it somewhere to go in mobile. And we have to kind of curate, and get these startups and get these mobile location companies kind of directed towards the brand and audience.
And I think one last thing is just how does it fit in with the rest of the plan? And I think that if you don't fit in, you'll probably not get any space. So it's just on the lines of just who else can you work with, who else do you know in the ecosystem, how easily does your technology go from one system to another. I think those are the kind of things that the clients typically are looking for as well. It's just, you don't want a new vendor just because of how cool they are all the time.
Now taking it back to you guys, what's the aspect of mobile location that you would like to see solved right now? Where are the biggest holes that you're frustrated with and that makes you angry?
Sorry.
I think that nothing has made a better case for mobile like hyperlocal and local has in terms of numbers. It just comes back right, you know it's working, people see click-to-call ratios go up, people see just store visits go up just because of how we're using mobile. However, what's happening is because of the number of technologies that are there, you get a lot of smoking mirrors. You get a ton of information and not everything is accurate and the technologies are not built out. So we don't know what is true, what is not. So I think the aspect that's missing is education and research. I think like everything that is phenomenal, it needs time, it needs patience, and I think that is something that needs to be evolved. I think partnering with research teams or things in terms of how it has been performing, how can we learn from other verticals, all those things help. And I think that is hopefully, for 2014, that is hopefully my team's agenda is pretty much just how can we actually focus and learn more about it.
I think tracking is a very big piece of it and being able to prove that all of it worked. But aside from that, more interesting formats, aside from mobile banners, if there's more development in the way that what you can serve the consumer, and whether it be video or some sort of rich unit based on location, I think will go well.
So I think over the next year or so, one of the aspects I really want to see is restraint. Okay, and let me explain for a second. So when everyone up here and maybe out there work in digital, okay, when you explain to your parents what you do they still say like, oh, pop-ups? You're like, Mom, I don't do pop-ups. You know, like that's not what I do. But what I mean by that is like the first round of like digital advertising is really bad, and we already have reference to like the Punchy the Monkey ad and whatever. Like it put a really bad taste in people's mouths, and it still lasts today. Like there's a big percentage of people who still, if you said digital advertising, would still think spam or pop-ups or whatever. So as we're entering kind of a new phase now, where you're going to walk into a store and you're going to get a notification on your phone that this shampoo is 50% off. That's going to be a new experience, and I think all of us up here and out there will be like, ooh, cool, like, you know, it did it. But for a big percentage of the population, they're going to think it's very creepy, and they're going to think it's very weird, and they don't like it. So let's not bombard them with a bunch of weird stuff, and let's give them good things. Let's not, you know, for the first year or two, give them freebies, give them good coupons. Don't just give them a generic message. Let's make it worth their while, because if we kind of turn, you know, this next round off, it's going to be when we fight in that perception for another 5 years.
I think from my end, I echo what everyone has said. It's really measurement and creative. I think being in real time able to use the data and what we know about the location of the consumer and give them a relevant message, not just say you're 0.2 miles away, but how do we take that to the next level and make it tailored to the consumer is really where we'll see a tremendous lift in performance.
With a lot of the mobile companies out there, you know, whether it's a platform, a network, or exchange now talking about location, first you see that being a differentiator because we're all, you know, for the most part accessing similar inventory and working with similar third-party data sets. So where do you see location being that differentiator across those kind of 3 different verticals?
Well, yeah, we talked about this in our call, but it's becoming quickly not a differentiator because everyone offers it, and so like saying, I do geo-targeting through display, but it is pretty amazing in concept, but since everyone does it now, it's not that amazing. I think that, I don't know, I mean, I think that the way that it's being used and the inventory that it's being applied to is what becomes really important, and the environments that you're putting this location data into play.
I totally agree. I think it's just the context that you throw it back in. It's just how are you using it is more important than actually thinking about just what the technology is.
This is great. I think do we have time for questions?
We do. Love it. You guys are on time. This is so awesome. All right.
Thank you to all the panelists, by the way. I really
Let's give
appreciate
them, that was a great
coming.
part. It's really no one's here, so no one can see you. So, questions from the audience? Right here, all right. Could you please state your name and company, please?
My name is Tony Grossman. I'm from Leo Burnett in Chicago, part of the Polar Express, and the Polar Death Spiral. Jesse, this is a question for you. I was curious about the groups, the VCs that you have, bringing in technology groups, startups, and I'd just like to hear a little bit more about how that started and whether that comes from the VCs or whether it was something that you initiated. Sounds super cool.
Sure. I can't take credit for it. I would love to. It was my group, our CEO, Chris Copeland, and the group that's kind of been around for a while. And they kind of initiated it, and we call it our West Coast tour. And we come out this way, and like I said, we huddle up in a conference room for like 3 days. And you know, it does have a very Shark Tank feel to it. And I really feel sorry for like the VCs and companies that come at the end of the day on like that 3rd day, because we're just like, I hate you, I don't, you know, it's the worst. No, I mean, I don't know, something like that I recommend. You know, it's great. I mean, you get a really good feel for what's out there and what's available and what startups are doing. And a lot of them aren't ready. I mean, the majority of them aren't ready. Like I said, you see like typos on PowerPoints and terrible, you know, slides and speakers that don't know, you know, how to speak English and things like that. But you'll find that the few gems that are good and the next ones will say, hey, you know, you guys need to improve this, and this, and we'll see you next year.
and this is my plug, and I know the question was for you, but I think a lot of us agencies, because we know we can learn and be smart about everything, we at have this group called Mad Valley, which is like in the cheesy way of putting Madison Avenue and Silicon Valley together. But what this group has is probably, we have a space within our building, which is about 20 startups, and they all get to work on whatever they're working on, but at the same time, we give them access to some of our clients and campaigns, and work sessions where we can actually get their ideas, tell them what we're trying to solve, and this is, and it's not necessarily something I call a trend. I think it's a necessity for the entire industry in terms of just, there's no way I can keep up with what's going on, and then the only way I could is by having a lot of people in the same space who can teach us and educate us.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? One up, all the way in the back. All right, you're making me walk. Okay, name and company, please.
Hi there, I'm Jackie Mockridge from DigitasLBi in New York. So we talked a lot about today the need for scale and balancing that with the relevant messaging to your specific consumers. And as we all know, you're often sacrificing one for the other. So how do you find the appropriate balance in reaching someone who's going to be engaged, hitting them with the relevant messaging, but then increasing your reach as a brand?
Great question. I like that.
I think one thing that we didn't really talk about is location is typically just one part of our overall approach in mobile. And so because of that, we assume that through other tactics, we're hitting the consumer and able to attain scale. When we're looking specifically at location data, I think we also have to open our minds into how we get data and how we interpret the data. So it's not always just a linear path if we want to geofence our brick and mortar location, but we might want to geofence competitor locations or places that they might be going before they come to our location. So that's how you start to build out some scale.
I think also, you look to your partner for that scale and, work with a partner that can provide the scale. Then secondly, you use location as context so that you can increase the relevancy of the message at that point. You can use it for geo-conquesting, geo-targeting, or in our case, smart fencing, but you can also look at the audience as another way to leverage that household income data or, more of that third-party data to kind of open up your targeting abilities, but it's that location that allows you to make a more dynamic message that's very relevant to the consumer at that moment and that time.
All right, any other questions? Can we go? Once, twice. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a round of applause. All right. Moving on, I'd like to invite our next panel to the stage. The keys.